Brandon reached out to me last night. He's got a story on a GOP State Rep candidate, Lee Reeves. And I'll kind of let you take it from there, and then I have some questions for you. Does that sound good? You give us a breakdown?
Yeah, by all means. So, I have eyes and ears all over the state. People send me things. Sometimes it's worth looking at. Sometimes it isn't. But there's an opposition research firm called the Lion of Judah, and I happened to have done a podcast with this gentleman a couple of years ago. Didn't think anything about it. And essentially what it is an operative posing as someone who wants to find housing for an illegal immigrant, calls one of Lee Reeves' apartment complexes, and they bend over backwards. We don't need any documentation. Yes, about 80% of the people that we lease to are according to the lady that works for the apartment complex, says they're fresh from their country. And to me, it's something GOP primary voters need to know about, simply because if somebody does something for a living, right, you make money doing it, you're very unlikely to try to pass laws that are against your own self-interest. And when I spoke to Mr. Reeves about it, he was very respectful. He was very kind. Somewhere in the conversation, that got brought up. So you're saying I'm supposed to pass laws that are against my self-interest? And I'm like, yes, that you don't represent yourself when you run for office. That's why they call it serving, not being served. And if primary voters want to deter illegal immigration, then yeah, and anything you should and can pass, you should. And so we'll see how it plays out in the primary. But it is, to most GOP primary voters, a matter of concern.
So I want to back up just a little bit. So he owns apartment buildings, this GOP candidate, Lee Reeves, correct?
Yes.
Do we know how many apartment buildings he owns?
I do not. I didn't ask him about his entire real estate portfolio. So I'm not exactly sure how many. I know that he's not exclusively the only owner of this complex. I think there's like 20 some odd. I don't know if he owns 25% or if he owns 2%. So you'd have to ask Mr. Reeves that.
So I guess my concern on this is how is this pinned on Lee Reeves specifically? Do you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, it's in the eyes of the GOP primary voter, because it's not me. It's not our opinions don't matter. Their opinions do. And when you ask people, like I just did a Twitter poll and said, if you knew that someone housed hundreds of illegal immigrants, would you be more or less likely to vote for them? And like 96% said less likely. And so it's just an issue of when you make money serving a population that you're claiming that you're going to, discourage. It just asks the question, okay, now not only does this guy have to do the right thing, he has to do the right thing simultaneously against his own self-interest, and most people don't tend to do that.
Well, I guess my question would be, and I don't know Lee Reeves, and he has more than a right to come on and dispute this, but I guess my question would be, how much does he know? Or is this an apartment complex where there's a leasing agent with a quota who's just trying to meet her monthly numbers and is like, whatever we got to do to get people in, we'll get people in. You know what I mean?
Well,
I think that there's
typically when, yeah,
I think that there's a fair question of how much does he know about this, or is this something that he owns where it's like 2% and he doesn't deal with it? We say with like Trump with the business records, right? It's like, well, Trump's not doing his own books. So obviously Lee Reeves isn't doing the leasing for these illegal aliens. So
one of my very best friends does nothing but sell apartments for a living. I'm actually going to camp with him in Boone right now. So I've heard apartment selling conversations forever. And it takes a long time for apartment complexes to change hands. And there's this huge 18, 24-month due diligence period. You know who's renting your apartments. Nobody invests in an apartment. It's like, well, who rents here? We have no idea. I'm just going to throw my money into this thing. I don't know what the demographics are. I don't know about the nationality. I mean, you could do that. You wouldn't make much money. And so I think it's highly unlikely. People tend to invest in things they've researched, not things they don't know much about. At least that's been my lived experience.
But at a certain point, though, he's kind of got his hands tied. When you look at the Fair Housing Act of 1968, you you can't deny housing to a tenant based on their immigration status. I see a lot of pushback on your story about that. I guess what would be your response to that?
Well, I'm not arguing the legality of it. The legality of it is obviously like that's how the law is written. But there are a lot of things you can do that are legal that are unpalatable to the electorate. I mean, you can go to Nashville like a lot of these incumbents who are struggling right now, and their races against these conservative challengers. I know I've seen the internal polling, and it's their voting records, although legal, that have hung them. Giving tuition, in-state tuition to illegal aliens, giving them professional licenses, voting against sanctuary cities, all the stuff they've done in the darkness. But then you run against a good candidate, and all that stuff gets brought to the light. And so the question is not, is it legal or not? The question is whether or not GOP primary voters care. And based upon my instincts and experience speaking to them every day all over the state, I think most of them will.
But do you think that it's a leap saying that Lee Reeves knows that he's renting to illegal aliens, or do you think that is almost a guarantee?
No, because when I talked to him on the phone, he knew about it.
He knew about it.
It's not. Oh yeah. I mean, you can even read I've read his full response in the video on Twitter, and we're running a longer story on it today. And he knows. And I mean, but everybody who owns real estate knows who rents from them. I mean, it's just people, you have shareholding meetings, you get together, these are things people know. I mean, I've owned rental property for years, and you know who rents from you.
So, but what actions could he take to rectify that immediately?
Well, when I worked for Senator Corker on the finance side, when he knew that there would be a huge conflict of interest with all his property ownings in Tennessee when he ran for Senate, and so he divested himself from all his holdings, and he put it up. Actually sold it to another gentleman because he's like, this is going to be a conflict of interest. I got to get out of this. And so sometimes when you run for office, if you've got things that you're like, this is not, people are going to question this. This is not going to look good. I need to just sell it.
Yeah.
Right. And so, that would be one way to do it. And so the issue is just that, it's self-interest, right? It's hard enough to get a politician to do the right thing when they don't have money on the table about it. But when they do, I just see people typically work in their own self-interest. It's the reason, in the Tennessee Constitution, it says that men are capricious and they take advantage of one another. And that's why they set up the whole Tennessee Constitution the way they did. And people tend to act in their own interest. And so the role of government is to set it up so that there's so much conflicting interest that the interest of the public is generally served. And so it'll just be a question that he'll have to explain to people, because I assume that anybody that's running against him is going to make hay out of it. I mean, that's the whole point when you run for office, right? All this stuff comes out, and it's a jockeying game, and in the end, the voters get to pick.
If he divested today, would that be enough for you to say, okay, he did the right thing?
I don't think he's done anything necessarily wrong. I don't think he's done anything illegal. I'm just saying he's probably done something like GOP primary voters wouldn't like. Now, can you divest at this point and probably get some credit in the eyes of voters? Yeah. But the issue is there's an old saying in running for office, Chris, if you're explaining, you're losing.
Fair enough.
And you don't want to have to be explaining all the time, well, this is this, but let me spend 5 minutes talking to you about all the complexities of it. That's why sound bites end up working far more often. But I do think it's an issue, right? I mean, it's just a conflict. And so that's the kind of thing that really before you run for office, you try to resolve. And if you've got aspirations for running for office, you try to avoid if you can look that far enough into the future.
What time is your longer story going to be out today, and where can people find it?
It's already on TennesseeConservativeNews.com. Jason posted it early this morning. There's documents and ownership trails and all that stuff. But every time I'll close with this. Somebody runs for office. If you've got any sense at all, you hire a good opposition research firm, right? I mean, anybody who does it without doing that is really kind of crazy. Because it's not doing your homework. And so the moment you decide to run for office, your entire life's under a microscope, and that's part of the gig.
Yep, absolutely. Hey, real quick before you go, there was another incident in Nashville over the weekend. Patriot Front group were spotted unloading out of a U-Haul truck in Tennessee and then marching through, it looked like Broadway. What do you know about that? And what do you think about people calling this a potential false flag? Mike Lee out of D.C. said that.
Yes. I think this is a bunch of BS. Here's the thing. I've been involved in Tennessee politics for 20 some odd years. I've been to every hill and holler in the state.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen anything like that, number one. Number two, and I love it when the leftist Tennessee media, but I repeat myself, it always wants to call Tennessee racist. Mm-hmm. When you see hundreds of people piling out of U-Haul rented U-Haul trucks with masks on, color coordinated, everything brand new. I mean, that stinks to high heavens.
Yep.
I have seen some whack jobs every time we have any kind of event, or even the left has some kind of event. These crazy people come out, right? They're just crazy. They're professional protesters. They don't care. They just show up to cause anarchy every time. These are not those people. When those people show up to an event organically, like they're all dressed different, they're all weird, they're all, you can say, okay, that's a legitimate crazy protester person. This is somebody on the fringe.
Yep.
I've never seen people show up to a protest, color coordinated, masked, piling out of a U-Haul, all wearing the same outfit. So try to get a bunch of crazy people who live in trailers, they're racist, to get together in a color coordinated outfit and all pile into a U-Haul from the parking lot somewhere. Good luck, buddy. Good luck. I put together events and organized them my entire life. You can't get humans uniformly dressed inside a U-Haul to show up unless somebody's getting some money. And so I think what I'd love to see, people like Phil Williams, who, always has a lot of curiosity about things until the narrative breaks down, a.k.a. the Covenant school shooting, to dig into this and find out who funded it, who was here, who are these humans that were at the event, who rented the U-Haul.
You would think it would be. You would think it would be relatively easy. You just go find the U-Haul place where they got the trucks.
You would think, whether or not the U-Haul company would, disclose who they rented them to. But when you're showing up I've never seen humans show up in a U-Haul. Have you ever seen that? Have you ever seen humans show up in mass in the back of a U-Haul to go to anything?
I have not.
So this is weird, right? This is weird. It smells to high heaven. And what it is, these leftist groups, because there's hardly any racism left in America. I mean, truly, there's really no hardcore racism left in America. They manufacture and stage these BS events to keep carrying the same old tired narrative. And racism has worked real well for them. They loved being racist back during the Civil War. They love being racist during the Jim Crow, and then now they like being racist against white people. Like, it's just the same old card. They just switched the target,
yep.
Right? It's like so cyclical. And so I think that's what we're seeing. Again, I could be proved wrong, but it just every one of my journalistic instincts says, nah, this looks staged.
Yep, I'm with you. Brandon Lewis from the Tennessee Conservative News. Brandon, where can we find you and keep up to date with all the stuff that you guys are working on?
Guys, y'all can go to X, Twitter. You can just search Tennessee Conservative News wherever you get news online, wherever you get podcasts or social media. We have an account just about everywhere that we haven't been shadow banned, which is most everywhere but X. So, guys, we just bring y'all the news. You get to decide. And one thing I will say, Chris, a lot of news outlets pretend to be impartial. We don't do that. We provide news in Tennessee for conservatives and only conservatives who care about our country and our state. And so when we bring stories to people, we have an agenda, right? We have an agenda to inform conservative primary voters as the state's largest conservative news alternative. And I wish that so many liberals and Democrats in the media in Tennessee that masquerade as independent journalists would just come out and say, hey, I got an axe to grind. Here it is.
Yeah.
They don't do that.
No, they don't. Brandon, I love what you do, man. Appreciate you calling in.